Hello. Today we're going to talk about Mad Kings. The first king on our list is King Ludwig II. If you've ever visited Germany, chances are you've come across the iconic Neuschwanstein Castle. It's like something out of a fairy tale, which isn't too surprising given that its creator, King Ludwig, was also a character seemingly from another world. Dubbed the Mad King by his contemporaries, Ludwig had a knack for the extravagant and the dramatic. Ludwig wasn't the war-conquering, empire-building type of king. He was more of the let's build a fantasy castle with my face on it kind of ruler. The man had a passion for architecture and the arts, but seemed to forget that running a country required a little more than a flair for the dramatic. To get an idea of how impractical his plans were, just consider that he wanted to build a castle with a dining table that could be lowered through the floor to the kitchen below. That's right, a retractable dining table in the 19th century. Why? Because walking to the kitchen was just too mainstream for him. Unfortunately, his projects drained the Bavarian coffers, and not even his charm could make the numbers in the budget add up. His personal life wasn't any less extravagant. Ludwig was known for his mysterious nocturnal escapades. No, he wasn't fighting crime as a masked vigilante. He was taking moonlit sleigh rides. While his subjects were tucked in their beds, the king was gallivanting around the countryside in a sleigh, like some sort of Disney princess. If you're wondering what his advisors thought of all this, well, they were not amused. In fact, they declared him insane and unfit to rule, effectively dethroning him. One could argue that calling him insane was a bit much. He was more like an artist lost in his own world. His story came to a tragic end when he was found dead under mysterious circumstances, along with the psychiatrist who had declared him insane. The official cause was suicide, but many believe it was murder, possibly orchestrated by those who thought he was too much of a liability. In the end, he left behind not just questions and conspiracy theories, but also a legacy of astonishing, if somewhat bizarre, architectural wonders. Second on our list is King Charles VI, also known as Charles the Mad, who ruled France from 1380 until 1422. When we say that Charles was mad, we don't mean he was slightly irritable or having a bad day. We're talking full-on delusional episodes. There were times when he didn't recognize his own family or even himself as the king. Imagine waking up, looking in the mirror, and wondering, who's that guy wearing a crown, and why is he in my bathroom? Charles's reign got off to a relatively good start. He was young, energetic, and ready to rule. But then, the wheels started to come off. His first episode of madness occurred in 1392 during a military expedition, when he, for unexplained reasons, became very paranoid. When a servant accidentally dropped a lance, Charles turned around and began attacking his own knights, some of whom died. As for governance, well, let's just say things didn't run like a well-oiled machine. The fact that the king was afflicted by something called the glass delusion, which meant that the king occasionally believed he was made of glass, certainly didn't help administrative efficiency. This delusion led him to wear clothing that was reinforced with iron rods so that, according to him, he would not shatter if he came into contact with another person. Under Charles's unstable leadership, France went through the latter part of the 100 Years' War, losing ground to England and seeing internal divisions deepen. Yet, oddly enough, Charles's reign also saw certain cultural and architectural advancements. So the king might have been mad, but his era wasn't entirely a lost cause. Now, on to our third mad king, Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled Babylon from around 605 BC to 562 BC. He's the guy who built the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The king was known for his grand architectural projects and military conquests. He loved making things big: walls, temples, gardens, you name it. But among all these wonders, the king himself became one of the most baffling spectacles. Historical texts, like the Book of Daniel in the Bible, tell us that Nebuchadnezzar was struck by a form of madness. He reportedly roamed his gardens on all fours, eating grass like an ox for 7 years. Imagine being the royal gardener during this time. You're just doing your job, planting some new tulips, and there's your king, crawling around and munching on your lawn. Some modern psychologists speculate that he might have suffered from a condition known as boanthropy, where a person believes they are a bovine. Back then, there were no therapists to diagnose him. People just figured, well, the king is eating grass again. Royal grazing hours, apparently. Despite his erratic behavior, Nebuchadnezzar remains a significant figure in history. He expanded his empire, made Babylon a center of art and science, and left behind marvels that people still talk about. It's almost like he set the bar so high in his early reign that people gave him a free pass for the latter-day craziness. Now on to King George III, who sat on the British throne from 1760 until 1820. This is another monarch whose mental health has intrigued historians for generations. Now, George ruled an empire so big it was called the Empire Where the Sun Never Sets, which was perfect because he probably couldn't decide whether it was day or night anyway. George wasn't always known for erratic behavior. For much of his reign, he was a pretty okay king. He was even called Farmer George for his interest in agriculture. Apparently, ruling an empire didn't keep him busy enough. He had to throw in some farming on the side. But things took a dark turn for George in the latter half of his reign. He began experiencing severe mental illness, which historians now believe might have been porphyria, a hereditary disease. Symptoms include abdominal pain and mental confusion, a rather unsettling combo. Public incidents made it clear that the king wasn't well. He once greeted a tree thinking it was the King of Prussia. Now, don't get me wrong, trees are fantastic. They provide oxygen, shade, and endless climbing opportunities, but they make terrible conversational partners. Despite these lapses, George had periods of lucidity and was able to rule reasonably well during those times. But the inconsistency of his condition left many questioning the stability of the monarchy. Still, George was not without his merits. He sponsored arts and sciences and was a driving force behind the British agricultural revolution. People were like, yes, the king is talking to trees, but look at how well our crops are doing. In the end, the once capable king spent his last decade in seclusion under constant care, leaving the reins of the empire to his son, George IV. The loss of the American colonies might be the most talked about aspect of his reign, but it's important to remember the complexities of his life. After all, he was more than just the king who talked to trees. He was also the king who cared deeply for his kingdom, even if he couldn't always show it. The last king on our list wasn't really a king, but an emperor. Nero ruled Rome from the year 54 until his dramatic exit in the year 68. To call Nero colorful would be like calling a hurricane windy. It just doesn't capture the full picture. This is the man who, according to popular legend, fiddled while Rome burned. Although to be historically accurate, the fiddle hadn't been invented yet. But let's not ruin a good story with facts. Nero's foray into music and acting might have been considered charming if he were an average Joe trying to make it big, but Nero wasn't your average garden variety artist, he was the Emperor of Rome. While Rome was knee-deep in problems, Nero fancied himself a musician and an actor. Instead of strategizing about military campaigns or economic policies, he'd be in the theater strumming a lyre. Oh, but don't dare to leave the theater before he finished performing. Doors were locked until he was done, so not applauding was not an option. Another not-so-nice thing Nero did was that he kicked his pregnant wife to death. Following that, he found a boy who resembled her and had him castrated so he could marry him. While a creative imagination is usually a good thing, Nero may have taken that notion a bit too far.